Hi everybody and welcome to our show, Apocalypse Now. I'm your host, Brad Richards, and today we have a very special guest for you. Please welcome, from Cormac McCarthy's novel, The Road, the boy! Hi, welcome to the show. Thanks for having me, it's a pleasure to be here. So, wow. Can you imagine that it was a full 10 years ago that you and your dad had that incredible journey south after the apocalypse? Feels like it was just yesterday, and yes, what an incredible journey it was. I wouldn't have made it to where I am today without my dad, who kept faithful and hopeful throughout the whole adventure. So lots of thanks and love to my dad. Touching. So, I hear you're a fan of the movie The Book of Eli. Yes, huge fan. For those in the audience who don't know, what is The Book of Eli about? Well, it's a movie about a man named Eli who is in a recovering post-apocalyptic world, who has possession of the last Bible on Earth. Eli is sent on a quest by God to take the Bible west. There are people who want to take the Bible from him because they want to use the Bible's power to control the remaining people in the world. But of course Eli doesn't want the Bible's power to be abused or anything like that, and the whole film is him on his journey to the West Coast. Okay. And why are you such a huge fan? Well, I really enjoy it because I find it highly comparable to the situation I was in with my dad, and what of course Cormac McCarthy later wrote about. Not because they both took place in post-apocalyptic worlds, but because both Eli and my father, as I mentioned before, never lost the faith and kept hopeful about their success. Now, I know of course Eli's faith is in God and Christianity. Is that what you mean by keeping the faith in terms of you and your father? Well, no. In the Book of Eli, Eli most definitely has faith in God, but like me and my father, he also has faith and hope in success for his journey. My father told me that we carry the fire, and that represents faith, hope, and the will to survive without degenerating into what other people around us had become. So faith doesn't necessarily have to do with God. It's just believing that what you're doing has a purpose, and in mine and Eli's case, it had a purpose and a positive outcome. Even my dad really was successful because even though he died, he guided me to a positive situation, which is what I believe was his goal. So it seems to me like you're not only comparing your experience to the Book of Eli, but you're comparing your father to Eli. Absolutely, they're very comparable. For one, both Eli and my father of course had moral values. They lived by a moral code. If, however, their survival or objective were jeopardized, both Eli and my father would go against their morals if they had to relative to the situation. And I'll show you a few examples. You can roll the clip.
You know what I think? I think you're chicken shit. You never kept a man in your life.
This is why both Eli and my father are moral relativists. The interesting thing though is that they both had absolutism with them on their journey. Eli had the Bible, which of course is supposedly a text of absolutism with the Ten Commandments and whatnot, and my father had me, who of course at that age was too naive to know the importance of relativism in such a dangerous world. So both of them had absolutist influence on them throughout their entire journey, which is what I believe kept them from being moral nihilists, or at the very least, kept them from a more devious and destructive path, and perhaps even suicide. And in a post-apocalyptic world, it's an easy path to go down. Another thing that I can compare is motives. As I said before, my dad's motive was me, whereas Eli has the Bible as motivation. Very interesting. If I could ask you kind of a fun question here. Looking back, hypothetically speaking, do you think you would have rather traveled with your dad or with Eli? Well, of course my dad, because he's family, but personal feelings aside, I think I would probably go with Eli simply because of experience and survivability. Take a look at what I mean. We're gonna take a look at this clip.
All right, want to do it the hard way. Why'd you do that? He just cut my hand off. What are you standing around for? Get him!
What'd he say?
He's in shock. I think he meant kill him.
Eli obviously has elite combat skills, and that is definitely useful for when people are trying to kill you. Yes, I would say so. Another thing is that in the movie, Eli mentions he has been traveling for 30 years. That kind of experience is very valuable. But to be fair, the environment and resources in the Book of Eli were glamorous in comparison to what my father and I experienced. There was no society at all and far fewer survivors than there were in the Book of Eli. Okay, last thoughts before you go. What do you have to say to those who say that your father was wrong in bringing you on this journey? And between Eli and your father, who did more right? Who was the better man? You know what? Those people can argue that point all they want. Personally, I don't see how not committing suicide is a sign of weakness. My father sacrificed his life in order to give me a chance at a new life, which is what I got when I found a family on the beach. Human beings have a natural inclination to survive, and looking back, I agree with my father's decisions. In terms of who is the better man, I have to begin by saying they're both great men. Great men who showed great courage and ambition. The distinction I make between Eli and my father is that my father fought for survival, whereas Eli fought for the specific purpose of bringing the Bible west. My father was doing what he thought was best for his family, whereas Eli was doing what he thought was best for the world. So, Eli's deed was definitely more generous and selfless, but in terms of who is better, I can only conclude that they are both great men. Great answer. Thank you so much for coming, boy from the road! Thanks, I really appreciate it. It was a pleasure. Tune in next week, folks, to see us live with Desdemona from William Shakespeare's Othello.